Hello and welcome back, everyone, to Leading with Grace. I am so excited to share with you today's episode, and it's going to be a little bit different because my very good friend and coach, Julie Osman, is in North Carolina visiting me. So say hello, Julie.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to be here. It was so funny. It's my birthday month. And I said, I'm now accepting lunch dates. And she's like, if you can make it to North Carolina, I will take you out to sushi. So I made it to North Carolina.
Spokane, you guys, is possible. And so if you want to see this, well, live meaning like on video form, you can just go onto my YouTube channel and I'll have that in the show notes. And then you can see all three of us. And so I thought it would be really fun to invite Julie onto this podcast episode with Leah Davidson. And Leah Davidson is a trauma coach. And the reason why I have invited her was I want her to talk about how trauma from our past life, from our past experience, can affect how we handle our pre-divorce, in the midst and thick of things as we were like in divorce process, and then post-divorce. And so with that being said, I would like to turn the time over to Leah to introduce herself to all of you.
Hello. Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. And I'm excited to have both of you here because I think we'll have a great little roundtable conversation. I am a coach, obviously, and I'm from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And I coach people really who have experienced a lot of stress in their lives, burnout, compassion fatigue, trauma, and my jam is nervous system resilience. I am also a speech pathologist, and I have worked for the past close to 25 years now in the area of traumatic brain injury. So that was really my first exposure to what we would call big T trauma, as I've helped people over the years navigate changes in their life, changes in their identity, go through really sometimes the biggest adversity in their lives. And then I went through my own divorce and have had my own adversities surrounding that. And all that together has sort of created my interest in coaching who I coach, and really beginning to understand how the mind and the body are connected. And we really have to take care of both of them in order to heal. So I'm happy to be here and to chat with you.
Awesome. All right. So the first question that came up in my mind is, how would you define what did you call it?
Nervous system resilience.
Nervous system resilience. Like, what is that, first of all?
So we often hear about nervous system regulation, and so our nervous system is essentially how the brain and the body communicate with each other. It encompasses our brainstem, spinal cords, and all the nerves. It's bidirectional, goes back and forth primarily through something called the vagus nerve. And resilience, as you probably are aware, is this idea that we can bounce back, that we can bend and not break, we can fall apart and pick ourselves back up again. Regulation is often what we refer to as being able to come back to homeostasis, come back home, come back to sort of our set temperature. But I really do think that our nervous system, it's about being resilient. It's about being able to deal with whatever adversity is thrown at us. Sometimes we need to be activated. Sometimes we are a little bit less activated. It's our ability to go up and down, ebb and flow, coming back to our home base. So that is, to me, the foundation of almost everything that we do sits on our ability to manage our nervous system. And I believe our nervous system is resilient. We can teach it to be even more resilient. And that's what I love to show people how to do.
That's so beautiful. And how long have you been coaching about nervous system resilience?
So, like I said, because I've been a speech pathologist for the past 25 years, and when most people think of speech paths, they're like, oh, do you work with kids with R's and S's and stutters? And I don't. I've worked with, in this area, it's called cognitive communication. And it sort of started out, I help people with their memory, with their attention, all their executive function skills. And throughout the years, I just saw that people needed more. I became a life coach about 10 years ago. I did one certification with a client, actually, who needed somebody to do the course with her because she wasn't able to cope with it on her own. And I did it, and I was like, oh, this is so good. It matches everything that I do. And then I eventually became certified with a life coach school, started doing a lot more work, diving a lot more into specific areas about resilience and about nervous system, and was working in those areas with my speech pathology, traumatic brain injury clients. And then just gradually, my coaching business has expanded. And so bringing all that over to the other side. So it's hard to sort of pinpoint, because really my experience has been over the past 25 years when, working with trauma, probably not even realizing that I was working so much with the nervous system at that time, because it wasn't really talked about as much. It's much more of a buzzword now. And it was probably about 5 years ago that I was like, oh, okay, this is how it all comes together. This is the missing piece. This is what I've actually been doing. I just didn't even realize I was doing it. So that's a bit of it.
It's so beautiful. I love that. So thank you for sharing your journey and just coming to realize that it was progressive and ever evolving, and here you are now.
Yeah.
And so I saw that you were on a previous podcast about how your parenting how you parent can be affected. Am I saying that right? By like past trauma.
Yeah.
And it made me think about divorce. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And how we go into our separation and divorce. And like as I'm thinking back on I've been separated 2 years. And if you asked me 2 years ago, why I was handling my separation the way I was handling my separation, I would totally like throw like my spouse under the bus, right?
Right.
Realizing now that, you know what, there may be more to why I'm reacting the way I'm reacting.
Right.
It could be as simple as I just didn't know mind work. I didn't know thought work. Okay. And that
Mm-hmm.
might be true. But when I started thinking about, well, what if my past experiences is affecting how I'm handling the situation? I don't know. In a really weird way, it made me realize that maybe I have some more power and control over my thoughts and feelings and actions, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so can you talk a little bit about first of all, how you define trauma and how past trauma can affect how you think and feel and act during a separation and divorce?
Right. Right.
I know that's a
Well,
lot. Sorry, I just kind of threw it
yeah,
all out.
no, that's okay. That's okay. Before we jump into trauma, I do want to just talk just a little bit about the nervous system, because I think that speaks to how we can talk about trauma. Is our nervous system is constantly scanning for safety and danger. And that's really all it knows. And based on what it picks up in the environment, what it picks up internally, and what it picks up between us, it's going to assign us in a state of safety or a state of danger, a state of connection or a state of protection. And our nervous system has been created throughout our entire life. Like when we're in utero, we are feeding from our mother's nervous system. So we have these imprints along the way, which sort of shape what our nervous system is. And we start responding to things as a way to adapt to the stressors in our life. So as a young child, things would happen to you. Sometimes they would be what we'll talk about, quote unquote, traumatic. And sometimes it's just everyday life things that were overwhelming for our system. And so we learned how to cope in certain ways. We picked up on certain tendencies and certain habits and certain ways that we coped. And that's important because we're supposed to pick up on strategies and ways to cope. But there are healthy ways to do it. And then there are unhealthy ways to do it. And of course, as a child, you don't know any different. You're just doing things to survive. Well, what happens is sometimes we get stuck in certain, I talk about, there's these zones. We have this safe social zone. And then sometimes we get stuck where we are constantly maybe being activated because we're sensing danger. We feel threatened. Maybe we're growing up in an environment where there was abuse or neglect, or maybe it was simply we had overpowering siblings, or we had a parent who struggled with anxiety, or we were bullied in school. All these things left an imprint on us. And that imprint is really what trauma is. We get stuck in an environment where our nervous system can't handle it, and our response is a traumatic response. We carry that and we continue that like on a daily basis. We're scanning safety, danger, safety, danger. And if I have been exposed to a lot of danger in my life, I am more likely to find more danger, and I am more likely to continue to be using the strategies, the adaptations that I created when I was a child, whether they were good ones or bad ones, which I think leads us to, even before the divorce, we sort of look at who we're choosing as partners, why we're choosing them as partners. Often we're choosing what's familiar, and we are responding in familiar ways, which means that we could just be coming into a relationship that maybe is not even a healthy relationship from the get-go, simply because of our past experiences as children and what our nervous system was exposed to.
Oh, that's so interesting. And I remember you saying that like trauma is not the situation, but trauma is our
Right.
response.
It's
Am
our
I saying
response.
that correctly?
Totally. Because what happens is you can have lots of experiences in your life, and it's not going to affect me the same way it's going to affect you. Even within a family, you can have certain kids who are quote unquote traumatized and other ones not. And that is because of how they responded. We do know that there is some genetics in how sensitive we are. And, there's highly sensitive people. So that can play a role, certain personality characteristics. But we also know like birth order and what was going on in the lives of our caretakers and what was happening in the world around us and the friends we had and who we were exposed to. All those things, if our system became overwhelmed, we will have trauma, but it might not overwhelm my sister or my brother. And so we will all have different experiences. So you can't really label things as a traumatic experience, because we do it anyways, just by ease of, there are certain things I referred to earlier, my work with brain injury, that there's big T traumas, which are traumas that we all would probably say, oh yeah, war and accidents and abuse, that's considered big T traumas. And then there's something called little T traumas, which are sort of the more chronic and subtle and consecutive things. So it could be neglect. It certainly is things like divorce for children when their parents divorce, but it could just be having a bad experience at school. It could be just being painfully shy and being forced into situations that you're not exactly comfortable with. These small T traumas, even though we've labeled them as small T, they can have lasting effects. And, if it's cumulative, it can really wreak havoc on your nervous system, and you can get stuck in these dysregulated states. And that almost becomes your way of life. You don't even realize that you're dysregulated. It's just who you are. And I think that when I've talked with people who have been divorced, often I hear them say, I didn't even realize that my entire marriage, I was dysregulated. I was functioning from that dysregulated place, and I had no clue. I just thought, what's wrong with me? Why can't I deal with it? Why can't I suck it up? Why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? Without realizing this was really a trauma response. And I just didn't know how to do it. And when you understand that the trauma response and your nervous system is physiological, I think it removes all the shame and the blame. It's not a choice. It's not a weakness. It's not a moral judgment. It's a physiological response to threats that your nervous system has picked up based on all the imprints of your entire life.
That reminds me of when I was reading Atlas of the Heart from Brene Brown, and she talks about having 1,000 little tiny paper cuts all
Yes.
over your body, where you think of one paper cut and how painful that is, especially when it gets aggravated by alcohol or an acid or something like that. But if you have it all over your body, you're just in this constant state of ouch, that hurts. And
Exactly.
you don't even,
Yeah.
and it's the tiniest thing. So you think it shouldn't hurt, but it does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so, and as you're talking, it's like I'm just realizing right now, like I have been dysregulated my whole
Right.
marriage.
That's the majority of the time when I
You're
coach
like,
people.
oh,
That's
yeah,
it. Almost
it's totally me.
inevitably when I coach people with divorce, who are going through a divorce, we'll start with just coaching, and then as I start explaining the nervous system and how it works and what it means to, have a trauma response and go through all that, there's usually this moment of, oh my gosh, I know exactly, I have felt what you were talking about. I just didn't know. And usually, I don't know how it is for you, but usually there was so much judgment on that. And when you can understand it's physiology, it's not morality, it's not a choice that you made, it's just for survival. That is all you knew. And in a sense, like, thank you. Thank you, nervous system, for taking care of me and thinking you had to protect me. And I'm ready now to learn how to be safe. And I'm ready now to say, I don't need that protection anymore. And when you do that and you learn how to create safety, that is where you can start creating that joyful, resilient life.
Okay. So, all right. So, Julie, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So, I'm curious to know, all right, as we're talking about dysregulation, like, does any of that resonate with you? Like, did you ever recognize that, like, in the moment that you were being dysregulated, or, or I don't know. Talk to me about that.
I mean, not until I learned about what dysregulation was.
Yeah.
I had no idea that that's what was happening for me.
Yeah.
But when I learned what it was, yeah, absolutely. As you're talking, I'm going, oh, and this time, and this time, and this time. And it was such a beautiful process once I realized how to regulate and how to recognize it and not just live in that one. While I was going through my marriage crumbling and the divorce process, I didn't have those tools until towards the end of that. And so there was a very long period of time, probably several years, that I was just in a constant state of um, heightened dysregulation. And I would go on the higher end, not the lower end of
Right.
emotional, if you're looking at a regulation
Yeah.
window. And when I learned how to get myself back into that window of calm with breath work, with meditation, with the self-soothing, that was amazing. But even more amazing, I still felt that pain
Yeah.
that comes along with that emotional pain that feels physical. I still felt that until I learned how to become resilient. Like, there's such a difference. I love how you said it earlier. There's such a difference between regulation, because that feels temporary to me, and
Yeah.
resilience, which is more long lasting. I don't have that emotional pain anymore. When things are thrown at me, I'm like, oh, I know how to handle this, because
Right.
I do know that I am resilient.
Mhm.
Where I just didn't have the tools before to keep it in that window of tolerance.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note too that some people will always feel that emotional pain, but they also know that they can handle it, because our nervous systems are all different. And so when some people confront pain, you're able to confront it. And I say to my clients, we're trying to confront pain in a light and easy way. And, I work with a lot of people who have chronic pain and chronic illness as well. And that's the same approach that we take. The more you fear the pain, the stronger it's going to be. And it's the same way with that emotional pain. So when you are so resistant to any type of emotional pain when you're going through the divorce, the more resistant you are, the bigger it is. And learning to be resilient is learning to sort of like, yeah, you just notice it. Oh, here you are. You're like a guest. Are you here for dinner? Then pull up a seat. And I don't have that fear, because I know you're going to leave. And I know I get to decide when you leave. I know that I can say, you may be here. Oh, you're spending the week. Okay, that's great. Or, you know what? I don't want you here right now. And there's the door. And that resilience is, I can fall apart because I know I can stand back up. I can be weak because I know in that weakness is also my strength. And so that is the resilience that you can have when you just fully embrace all the emotions.
Wow.
Yeah.
So good. I think what came up for me in regards to like dysregulation is I never felt safe
Mhm.
to just say what I wanted. Like
That's right.
it
Yeah.
could be like, and it's not like anything big, right? Like it was like, no, I don't want to cook tonight. Can we just go out?
Yeah.
Or no, I want to do this, or I'd rather do this, or I want to go on a trip. Like just like
Mhm.
little things like that. And I'm just realizing, oh my gosh, like I never felt safe. And when I say that, I'm not blaming it on him at all. Like
No, yeah, it's your perception of safety and danger is fully created by you. In terms of it, it is your nervous system that has been taught along the way what is safe and what is dangerous. There are true dangerous situations, like if you are in the middle of a war zone or you are in a situation where somebody is directly abusing you. But the majority of the time, we are empirically safe. We may not feel emotionally safe with different people, which is, I like to separate it out for people, but empirically, you are safe. Once you establish that safety, then you can move on to, okay, I don't feel safe though, and that is a body thing. And when you can learn how to recognize and then bring safety to that, you start to be able to, tolerate things more and speak up more. And so it is for a lot of people, they have never felt safety. Their window, their zone of safety is so, so, so small. And that's what trauma does. It reduces your ability to feel safe in any situation.
so good. And I just think I'm sorry, there was something that you said, and the thought that I had was that well, no, actually it's probably more of a realization is that even though I discovered coaching a year before my separation,
Mhm.
and then I hired my first coach um 6 months before we actually were like physically separated. And as much as I loved coaching and all the thought work and everything, I couldn't figure out why I was so emotional. Like I couldn't, they're like, you just need to change your thoughts. And I'm like, it wasn't working.
That's it.
And I couldn't figure out, I'm like, maybe I just don't know coaching enough. Maybe I haven't done it long enough. Maybe I hired the wrong coach because I had a one-on-one coach I was hiring.
Yeah.
And so because it's all in the body. And I think, was
I
it
think
you?
it starts in I think it's both. Like I think thought work is amazing, but if we do look at the nervous system, it's bidirectional, right? That vagus nerve, which is really responsible for getting us to calm, it courses through from the brainstem all the way down to our organs. It has branches to sort of our face, to our heart, and it communicates both ways. But the communication, only 20% of the communication goes from the brain to the body, and 80% comes from the body up to the brain.
Oh, wow.
So when we are doing thought work and when we are trying to change our thoughts, it can work because there is communication down to the body, and that's why it does work for many people. But then what also happens is sometimes people do get stuck because it's not enough, because the body is like, yeah, I know that you're saying that, but I don't feel that way. And that's when, if we go into the body and get the body feeling safe, then the body can use 80% and be like, okay, I'm on board. I feel safe too. And then both are in alignment. And when we have alignment, that's when we have safety. That's when we have peace. That's when we have resilience. So I think it is both. There's a duality. We have to be doing top down and the bottom up. It's just the bottom up has a lot more pull to it because there is a lot more communication that the body is sending to the brain.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
No.
But it makes me think of something that I've thought of recently, in the last couple of years, as to why it's so important to not procrastinate the day of our repentance. And let me just clarify that when I say repentance, it's totally about change and coming to more closer to Christ.
Right.
Not necessarily that you're doing something wrong or that
Right.
you have something that you're, isn't right about you, but just taking those steps to become more and more Christ-like, is that we need our bodies in order to do that. Like
Mhm.
our bodies are so important to that process that it's not as effective without our bodies. And that's why that scripture, that it took on new meaning when I learned about somatic work and how
Mhm.
important it was, is I'm like, oh my goodness, it's because it's so much easier to make those changes and to heal our spirits with our body than
Right.
it is without our body.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's
So
the
good.
totality of it. It's the wholeness of it that we need to be doing it.
And the change of heart, it's like, it really is. And if instead of seeing repentance as just I'm sorry and shame and
Mhm.
retribution and earning and giving back, what if it really is just healing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like you were saying, it's the top down and the bottom
Mhm.
up and
Yeah.
getting those in alignment,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
So that
Yes.
makes repentance and even forgiveness in such a
Mhm.
different light.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
When I think of forgiveness, I think of, where does forgiveness take place? In a regulated state or a dysregulated state? It's going to take place in a regulated state. And if I think, like, the best example we ever have of regulation is obviously Christ, being completely regulated with all the emotions and thoughts and feelings that go along with that. When we are able to regulate ourselves, when we are able to embrace all our emotions, forgiveness can be included in one of those emotions. When we are dysregulated and we're either activated or we're under in that hypo-aroused state, much harder to be trying to forgive somebody. I mean, you could pretty much forget about it when you're in an activated state, being able to forgive somebody, because the flavor of being in an frustration, irritability, and defensiveness and anxiety, and all those, like, you feel the charge in your body. So when I say all those words, like, which word doesn't fit? Forgiveness. Like, it doesn't fit with anger and defensiveness and irritability, and it doesn't also fit when those in that hyper aroused state. I call them team hyper and team hypo. So when you're in team hypo and it's helpless and hopeless and sad and depressed and burnt out, forgiveness, no, it doesn't fit there either. But when we go up to that regulated state, this is where we find courage and compassion and care and tolerance and resilience and forgiveness. I found home. This is where forgiveness is. So when people are struggling with forgiveness, I do think we can do some mind work. We can talk about it. We can, rationalize with ourselves. Say, yes, it's a gift for me. And this is how, all those things that we can say. But I think true forgiveness is going to be when we feel in that place of safety and connection and true compassion. When we're regulated, it almost is like just a natural process that, okay, I think I'm ready for forgiveness. I've surrounded myself with really these Christ-like attributes. I've surrounded myself with that. Let's throw forgiveness into the mix. And I think I'm ready for that now.
Oh, wow. I love that. And it reminds me of a conversation we had the other day about joy
Mhm.
and just how when we are in alignment, and it sounds like the top down and bottom up, like they are regulated, and that we can really experience and bring in joy.
Yeah.
The gratitude and the
Yeah.
graciousness, grace and
Yeah.
love,
And I
Because
want
all those live there.
in
and
there,
peace.
and peace there,
Yes.
because I think sometimes when we think of joy, we're like just like, oh, happy, happy, joy, joy state. But joy is also peaceful.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
totally.
all those emotions can only take place when you are feeling safe and regulated. Like, again, try putting joy up with anger, frustration. Like, it's like a little game, like which one doesn't fit? And you just move the puzzle. They all are going to fit when we are regulated. And so if we are struggling with getting our mind around something, then we can try to do it from our body. And when we do it from our body, that's when we can sometimes see these shifts start to happen.
Yeah. And there is such a connection with our body and spirits too,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I know, like, from my personal experience, and I know that from just talking to Julie and with her personal experience, like, it is possible to get to this state in the midst of a divorce.
Yes.
It's not,
Yes.
it's I don't think it wasn't automatic for me. I don't think it was automatic for you, but it's possible, right?
Yes. I think for me, like with my divorce, so I had been married for about 22 years, and all of a sudden we started to argue. And it wasn't like all of a sudden, like one day we weren't and one day we were. It was just like a frequency of the arguments started coming more and more and more around year 22. And I couldn't understand what was going on. I'm just like, we never argue. Like, what's happening here? But progressively, it became worse and worse and worse. And so my nervous system was all out of whack. But thankfully, the Lord led me to this beautiful, beautiful woman, actually two beautiful women, one who did yoga therapy, which was a game changer for me because talk therapy was not helping because it was all up here. I had to get into my body in order to have healing happen. And then another one who did a lot of breath work. She's a licensed therapist turned life coach. Because she was just like, yeah, all the talk therapy wasn't working, so we had to get into the body. And those two therapies changed my ability to regulate so quickly that even though my marriage was tanking and that in my home there was such heightened stress, I had been taught how to regulate that and manage that. And so even though that situation continued to deteriorate, I was able to have a homeostasis within me. And I was telling Hio that before I found that, I probably would have had a very bitter divorce. It was a challenging and difficult divorce, but I showed up in peace and love only, honestly, through the grace of God, showing me and connecting me with these women to show me how to regulate myself with my body and keep that feeling of peace and joy and love and forgiveness throughout that whole divorce process. And not the funny thing, but the beautiful thing is that didn't happen for both of us. I'm the one that felt that. My children felt that from me. That was felt in my home. It was felt by other people who associated with me, but it wasn't something that was between myself and my former spouse.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally does. And then you were able to really what we call co-regulate, right? You were able to, connect with your kids. Our kids feed off of our nervous system. Other people feed off our nervous system. You fed off of these women who introduce different tools. And there are so many different tools. Things don't always resonate with different people. I do breath work and tapping, and these are a lot of somatic tools. And sometimes people are just like, yeah, that's not for me, but there'll be something else. I think it's trying to find what is a good combination with maybe the mindset work, and the mindset work will only work when you are regulated, because one of the things that happens when you become dysregulated is you lose access to your thinking skills. That's just by nature. We don't need our thinking skills when we're in survival. We have like a smidgen of them. And I always say to people, use that smidgen of them to remind yourself to regulate. And if you've been practicing how to regulate all the way along, then it's much easier because it becomes more automatic. But that's why for so many people, somatically is the way to go, because they're in dysregulation. They don't have access to talking and to the thoughts and all those things that we traditionally use for mindset work. Get into the body. And when they get into the body, they get regulated. Now let's start talking. And then you can actually have a lot of change by doing talk therapy when you're in that regulated state.
That makes
Yes.
so much sense.
That's one thing that Hugh and I were talking about last night, is just that it's so amazing to us and such a beautiful gift that there are so many different modalities to heal.
Yeah.
And that works for whoever, whatever stage you're in, because it's not that breath work wouldn't work for everybody, but maybe somebody's in a different stage that they don't really have access to that yet.
Mhm.
And the yoga therapy, like I was telling her, I had been feeling impressed to do that for 3 years before I actually took action on it.
Oh, wow.
Because I wasn't actually, I didn't say the 3
No,
years
yeah.
part. I
It's
said
fine.
3 years.
Wow. Yeah.
No, it was 3 years. And I was telling her that I let money be a reason why I didn't do that. But finally, money didn't matter anymore because I was so dysregulated. But my point is just that yoga it wasn't something that I was open to for those first 3 years. And then I finally got to a point where I'm like, I need something. And it just kept coming back. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll try it. And, but that was just one modality. There's the breath work, there's meditation, there's exercise, there's
Just
music,
movement.
therapy, just everything.
It's about getting to safety. So what for you is the way that you can get to safety? And that's always our goal. And that's why for some people, it's not like you said, it's not like the modalities don't work. They do work. But for different people, like for some people, breath work is just too intense and it's sending off too many signs of danger. It might work further down the line. But for some people, depending on what their experience has been, how their nervous system has been imprinted, they may be like, no, that to me is danger because of my experience. So you're always wanting to ask yourself, what feels safe? What do I need right now? What is going to be calming and invigorating to my body? And that's what you want to go. And that's why it's good to be exposed and to try different things, because you likely don't know if you've been dysregulated for so long. Feeling regulated is actually scary. It's foreign. You don't know what it feels like. And that's why you have to sort of just dip a toe in one thing, pull back out, dip a toe in something else, pull back out. You don't want to do too quickly, because that can overwhelm the system. You just want to, I'm going to try this. I'm going to see what happens. No judgment, no commitment really at the beginning, just to try it. Does this feel safe? Does this feel good? Yes. I'm going to keep going with it.
Okay, I'm just having another aha moment of like, there are times like at the beginning stages of my separation where I really did feel peace and calm. But at the same time, it's like, no, this shouldn't be happening. I should be on like alert. Like I should like have like my eyes should be wide open and I should be looking for danger. And so, yeah, just when I had those moments of regulation where I was like calm and I felt peace and aligned, at the same time, there was this war going on of like, no, this is not how it should be.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, when you're dysregulated for a long period of time, like I said, safety usually feels dangerous. And that's why usually the first thing that we work on when people have experienced trauma is feeling safe. And when you can help people, even as coaches, there is concern about re-traumatizing our clients. Not deliberately, obviously, none of us want to do that, but sometimes by bringing up certain things, we can re-traumatize somebody. But if we put our focus initially on safety and helping them understand what feels safe for them, helping them get to safety, know what their safety anchors are, then we are like much less likely to be leading them to re-traumatization, because they always have that grounding of safety. So that's sort of where you want to start with, in my opinion, all your clients. That's where you want to start.
Yeah. okay, so I have a question, and this might be a very broad question, but what are some signs of dysregulation? Like someone is listening to this podcast, okay, and they're probably asking themselves, okay, I'm going through a divorce. How do I know I'm dysregulated? How do I know I'm in trauma mode? What are some signs? What are some symptoms? And like I said, that might be too broad, but can you kind of give us an insight?
So, I mean, the simplest way to look at it is when you are dysregulated, you either are going to be activated. So you go into that hyper aroused state, and that is where fight and flight live. So, fight, you may recognize that you are angry, that you're frustrated, that you're irritable, that you're defensive. If you are in flight, that might look like you are just constantly keeping yourself busy. You probably have a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, maybe a lot of rumination. People who are sometimes chronically busy or stuck in like a perfectionist mode where I can't put it down until it's done. That's an indicator of being in flight. There's also freeze, and freeze is, and we can have something called functional freeze, where it's basically a combination of being activated and also in this shutdown mode, like so almost paralyzed. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. The functional freeze is I'm continuing on in my everyday life, but I can't feel anything. I'm sort of numb out, but I'm still moving. Or you could be in that hypo aroused state, and this is where people are struggling. You'll recognize things like depression, sadness, burnout, really hopeless, helpless, almost like a woe is me victim attitude that you'll feel. And so those are all signs that you're in dysregulation, just in a nutshell. When you are regulated, again, those are where you're going to have feelings of tolerance, compassion, peace, joy. You still will have up and downs, but you are not scared of your emotions. The other ones are very fear driven, whereas when you're regulated, it is driven more by peace. It's normal for us to be going up and down in all of these areas. Our goal is not to just sort of stay stable with no ups and downs. We want a healthy nervous system that is able to respond appropriately. When it's in danger, real danger, it needs to act as if it's in real danger. It needs to take things in control. But we don't want to be stuck in that state. We need to be able to come up and down. So if you find yourself chronically dealing with one of that fight or flight or that shutdown, it's a good indicator that you are stuck in a dysregulated state.
So good to know. So then what's next? Like they're thinking, okay, I am in dysregulation. I
Yeah.
don't know how to get out of my body. I don't know how to not fight.
Yeah.
I don't know how to not freeze.
Mm-hmm.
So then what's the next step?
I usually suggest people that they do spend a little time trying to figure out I call it their landscape, what their landscape looks like. So what does fight or flight look like for you? So you can start identifying things. So start building that awareness. I think awareness is the most important piece. And then the next step is to, okay, I recognize I'm dysregulated. Recognize it's a physiological response. So there's no shame, there's no blame. Like I said before, it's not a weakness, it's not a moral failing, but okay, for whatever reason, and we don't even have to figure out the reason at the beginning, whatever reason, I'm just stuck in this dysregulation. I need to start thinking of things that will help me feel safer. And then you will want to do, I mean, ideally working with somebody to help guide you. That makes it, sort of bypass a bunch of steps. But I think it's like what Julie said. It's just you start trying things. I'm going to try to do some exercise. I'm going to try to do some meditation. I'm going to try to take a creative class. I'm going to try to spend more time with people that I feel lift me up. Those are all things that can help you widen your zone and help you feel safer. But you have to be willing to dabble in different things. There are like things that research has shown, like exercise and meditation and creativity even things like laughter, social connection, those things we know are proven to help widen your zone. Breath work is a huge one. Different kinds of breath work, because I'm assuming that some of it that you're talking about, Julie, is that activated, where you can get that activated state, but the breath work is also very, very deregulating. Just relaxing your body is a way to start. When people are in that activated state, they're either in that fight or flight. You may have excess energy that you want to move through and get out. And that's where things like exercise is going to be crucial for you. Every day, completing that stress cycle, getting that energy out. But for other people, it may be a tenseness that they have, like a constant rigidity, and maybe even accompanied with pain. And then we're going to want to work on softening. And with my clients, I get them to work on things like the rag doll is one thing that I teach them. It's just really, okay, letting your body go limp, letting your body just relax, because stress and anxiety and fear, it cannot live in a relaxed body. So changing your physiology can help you get into that safe zone very organically.
And I kind of want to add that I don't think love and peace and joy can live in a rigid body.
I totally agree.
To have that softening, and it talks about the softening of the heart, but also of your body, of your whole being, in order to live in those states that Christ really has invited us to be in love, in peace, in joy, right? And I also think that when you're trying all these other things like breath work, and I want to throw in, music therapy, just because that's
Absolutely
for me, to also go back and check in, go back and take inventory. Is like, how am I feeling now? Am I still in a heightened state? Did that help me? Because I think a lot of times as humans, at least I do this, I'm like, okay, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to check this off my box, and then I'm going to be good. Right?
Right. Yeah.
And then like on my way.
It actually is a hyper zone to be.
But what you were talking about before is like, it's natural for us to go up and down, but like I want to set it and forget it. Like I do not want to have to keep checking back in, but we have to, because where I get into trouble is where I think, okay, I'm doing these things, I'm good, but then I'm unaware of something else that maybe has crept in, or I haven't been paying attention. And so we constantly need to go back and like check our temperature. Where are we?
Exactly. Where am I? Yeah. With my clients, one of the things that we do is we do a workshop on creating their own personalized menu, their own menu of how to grow their zone, and their own menu of how to down regulate and how to up regulate. And this menu at the beginning is just for them to, okay, I'm going to try this now. I'm going to try it. And you will go through. And I say to them, like, afterwards, is this like a yes or a no, and just cross it off. And eventually what happens is we will create that laminated menu that will be good for a period of time until you want to change it up again by learning new things. But I do think it is important that we have different resources. We're trying out different resources, and we're consistently checking back. Is this doing what I want it to do? Is it helping me in the way I want it to be helping me?
So good. And just like when you were talking and sharing your experience, Julie, it reminded me of another conversation we had the other day about how
we've been talking.
That's right. You've been talking a lot.
Next time you're invited, come on, Leah. North Carolina. I'm just straight down. But but you were talking about how it's so important that we discover who we are, like being who we are. And I think that when we are in that softened state and we have a softened heart, where we allow peace and love and joy to come in, like that really is our true self, right?
Our true nature.
Our true nature. And I just like, and what came to me is like, God is always like on the mission for us to help us to get to that point.
Yes.
Like he wants us to discover and be aligned with our true nature, and he's going to help us.
That's right.
Like your experience of having the impression to look into yoga therapy. I think it's beautiful that he gave you 3 years to kind of like,
Yeah.
well, like,
I'm going to try this again. Here's the other prompting.
single piece. And then it's, then it's the book,
He
3 years
just
later, it's
knows
like, here
that
it
I'm
is.
stubborn, and he's like, oh, we got to start early on this one.
That's right.
I think it's so cool that then once you did that, then you just start something else. And he's just kind of
Mhm.
like allowing you, I don't know, giving you, I don't know what, but just giving you these
It
ideas.
truly is, the whole process and idea of opening my eyes, and eventually I had eyes to see and ears to hear. Like,
Mm.
it's not that he wasn't giving me the message, it was that I wasn't open to it. And as soon as I did open myself up to it, I was able to see everything that he had been, presenting to me and saying, look, I've got this smorgasbord of things to help you
Right.
choose.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I look at it like, when you think of a child who maybe is having a struggle, and you go to them and you sit with them for a little bit, and then you ask them, are you ready to have this, or do you want to talk about it? No. Okay, I'll come back. I'll check back with you. And you may leave them alone to sort of do their thing, and you peek your head back in the bedroom, and do you want something to eat? Are you ready to
Yeah.
you keep checking in. And I kind of think of that like, that's our savior. He's going from room to room, like, hey, I'll be back. I'm going to go check over here now. How's this person doing? And I'll be back. And then eventually, that child is just like, yeah, starts talking then, or says like, okay, I'm ready to eat now. I'm ready to share what happened. I'm ready. And that's when he's like, okay. And if it takes 3, 5, 10 years, it's just going to keep checking. Just going to keep checking in. Because I do think he wants us to be our highest self. And that highest self resides in a regulated body, and that is where we can receive inspiration, and that is where we can become more like him in that highest self.
Yeah. So if someone chooses to not do this work, because we all have a choice, and what would you say would be the implications? And again, this might be a very broad
Yeah, I was
question,
like,
but
this is leading into a whole other podcast
I
episode
know.
that we can talk
And
about.
we might have to do it. We may do it.
Yeah, we can
a
do.
part 2 on
Um,
this one. But
honestly, I think what happens is our body cannot tolerate being in a state of dysregulation for so long. And, initially it's like we get a tap on the shoulder, like, okay, you need to take care of this. It gets firmer. You need to take care of this. It gets firmer. You need to take care of this, until something happens where we have no choice but to take care of it. I look at it like our body, our emotions, so many things. They're like the lights on our engine dashboard, and you can ignore them for a period of time. It says you need gas, you need servicing. Okay, well, I can probably still go extra couple kilometers. I can keep going. And then all of a sudden your car stops, and you are at the side of a road, and it's random. It's the middle of the night. There's no one around. You didn't get to choose. And it's basically like, you got to take care of the car. And so I think when people are in that constant state of dysregulation, what we see is people do start experiencing chronic illness, chronic pain, relationships break down, lots of just personal troubles, mental health challenges, anxiety, depression. These are all things, I think, that are indicators that we are not taking care of what's going on in our nervous system. Maybe we have a lot of suppressed emotions. Maybe we're living a life that's not in alignment with our values or what we want. But when the body and the mind are in competition, the body will win. The body will eventually say, you are going to take care of me. And that's why we see so many people struggle with chronic pain and stress and burnt out. That's why we see people with these struggles, because they've been ignoring it. And the body's just like, no, I'm not going anywhere until you deal with me. This is it.
so does the body really keep the score? And I know this
Body
that is
really
the
keeps
book. I've got the
score.
book. So it's really true.
Yeah. And it's also Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No. When the body says no, you will listen. And you think about, even like the three of us have been through a divorce. That is a form of our body was saying no. Whether it was a divorce that we initiated or was initiated, there was a breakdown. And you're forced to deal with it. And some people, it may be a divorce. Some people, it may be mental health. Some people, it's chronic pain. Some people, it's, irritable bowel syndrome and migraines and all these other things that have mind-body components. The body is letting you know, and it's really going to sit there over and over and over until you're going to do something about it, because it's like, sorry, we're stuck on the side of the highway and we're not going anywhere until you fix me.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. In my work that I've done personally, my coach has helped me learn how to communicate with my body. And I don't think that's something that we're taught as a general rule in our society. How do you teach your clients to communicate with their body?
I think a lot of it starts with just observing what is going on in the body, that felt sense. A lot of times we try to use language to describe what is happening around us, and it is just sitting and absorbing it. I do a lot of that internal scanning. So that interoception, you can do that through meditation. Talking to your body through your breath, recognizing where your breath is and what your breath is doing. That is a big indicator as to where you are in regulation and dysregulation. Pain and tension, pressure, all those things in your body, cramping, all those things are indicating. If we're speaking a language of fear, it's going to intensify. So even playing around cognitively with our language of how we describe things, how we approach things. Movement is another way to communicate with our body. How do we feel inclined to move? Where do we have an impulse to move? Anything creative? There's just so many ways. I think it's individual for people, and it's important that they are able to explore. Posture is another way that we can communicate. We say a lot with our posture, with our facial expression. There's just so many. It's just being aware of the number. I mean, there are endless ways that our body is communicating. It's just, if we've been again stuck in dysregulation, especially in that lower part, you may be completely numb. And we may have to start with just like, this is my arm. This is, that sensation, just that light touch. People are at different levels of where they're at.
Wow. So have you found wisdom in like talking to your body? Like, have you been able to discover things that maybe you didn't know before?
Oh,
Going through
absolutely.
this exercise and activity.
Absolutely. Yeah. My body is very talkative. I mean, so am I, but I didn't know that pain and, the tightness and those things was my body trying to communicate with me until I learned about this. And learning about that, I am like, oh, wow, my body's constantly sending me messages of what I need to do. And sometimes I'm listening and sometimes I'm not. So it really does takes that practice. And I think it that you talked about earlier, Leah, where the more you practice, the more resilient you can get, and the quicker you understand what your body's trying to say. I will say my jaw talks to me on a regular basis. I don't always understand what it's trying to tell me, but at this point, I'm like, oh, pay attention.
That's right.
It's kind of like learning another language.
It is. Yeah.
Actually am fluent in French.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother story. But
well, I'm from Quebec, so we could probably
yeah, at some time I learned it in Africa, but
okay.
at some point, like I actually finally understood what a word meant. Like there it was being said over and over and over again, but I didn't really understand what it meant or the implications behind the word, the nuances behind the word. But at some point I learned that. And the same thing with your body. Like my jaw is speaking to me. Eventually I'm going to be like, oh, that's what it means. But I'm still kind of like trying to figure out those nuances.
And I think pain isn't, that's why I said this is a whole other topic for another podcast. But I think pain is one that we've been taught to think that pain means structurally something is wrong in the body. And that is true for acute pain, that when something happens acutely, that's true. But chronic pain, our body is amazing. It heals. So chronic pain is usually trying to tell us something else. It's a signal that, okay, what is going on? And chronic pain is often trying to tell us of not a physical problem, not a structural problem, but there's something going on, maybe emotionally, there's something happening in your life. And so the wisdom in that pain is, okay, what's happening? Why am I getting that jaw trouble? Why do I consistently get, I struggled with IBS for years and years and years. And when I had my children, it started to subside. And when I got divorced, it was almost gone. And I used to think, and it was only later on that I realized that that was my body talking to me. I was in such a state of dysregulation, a state of alert, a state of stress. And that's how my body was communicating. And it's now, I mean, it's dramatically reduced. It still comes up because I still go through things in my life, but now I have the wisdom of, okay, what's going on here? What's happening? Why are you, what can I do to help the situation? What can I do to calm down? I don't get freaked out about it. I don't have that same fear that I had in my 20s. Oh no, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do that. It's just like, oh, again, you're here. What are you trying to tell me? And I think pain and a lot of our illnesses, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to communicate with us.
Oh my gosh. So good. Oh my gosh. Okay. I want to keep going, but I know we're so past time. Oh gosh. Okay. Before we wrap up, or maybe in the mid or as we're wrapping up, I just have one other quick question, and then if you have any last minute question or last questions, Julie, that you want to ask Leah. But my question to you is, and I don't ask this of all my guests, but I feel like I need to ask you this question. What does it mean to you to lead with grace when it comes to healing our body?
Oh, that is a good question. I love that grace is there, because grace to me represents everything about my relationship with my Savior. And so to lead with grace is really to create a life where I am trying to be that example, follow in his footsteps, regulate myself, become more resilient. And as that resilient person, I can be that resilient parent, that resilient partner, that resilient coach. And I can help lead people, whether or not, I do work with some people within our faith. I have a lot of people outside of our faith. And to me, whether we're leading them back to Christ or we're leading them back to that home, resilient, safe place, it's kind of the same thing, whatever they want to call it. And that to me is leading with grace.
Thank you so much. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing your experiences, your expertise, and your faith and conviction in where we can find that homeostasis and coming home, right?
That's what it's about. It's coming home. I actually posted on, I talked a couple of weeks ago with my training group all about coming home. And then I shared with them, what does it feel like for you coming home? Because that's what we're always trying to create, and what can be our cues. And I shared with them the clip of the video of my son, who he's returned home from his mission a couple of years ago. But I shared with them that clip, and I was just like, every time I watch that clip, there's, even as I see him coming, it was during COVID time, so it wasn't like the grand that we thought it was going to be, but I see myself with a little hop, I jump, and then I, come to his arms, and I see how he, gets his brother to come close to him. And I'm like, this to me is coming home. That feeling is just a glimpse of what I always want to have in my heart. And I will watch that video over and over and over again, because I think there's nothing like that feeling of coming home. And to me, that's sort of been the closest it's ever been, is having him come home after so many ups and downs in that crazy time of missions, as well as a crazy time of COVID. So it is all about coming home to me.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Any other thoughts or questions that you have, Julie?
I don't. I think that wraps it up really nicely.
All right, awesome. Well, so before we end, can you share with my listeners where they can find you and follow you and
Sure.
come to know more about the work that you
Yeah.
do?
So I am on Instagram and Facebook at Leah Davidson Life Coaching. And I have my website's Leah Davidson Life Coaching. And I have a podcast called Building Resilience. And so I talk all about all this stuff on the podcast. And then for coaches, I also do a training called the Advanced Training in Nervous System Resilience. And we'll be getting ready to do cohort number 2 in the fall. So I'm excited about that because I'm just so excited to help people combine the tools of the mind with the tools of the body.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're
And
welcome.
I will make sure to have all your information in the show notes so that the listeners can click on to any of your resources. And you also have a freebie, right? If I recall.
Yeah, I have a freebie. It's called the 30-minute solution to burnout. And really, that is a great introduction to the nervous system. I talk about it in terms of burnout, but the tools that I teach are the introduction stages to nervous system regulation.
Yeah, so that would be great for you listeners. If you're wondering if this is a fit for you, if this is like the right path, I'll make sure to have a link to her freebie and then have access to it. And clearly follow Leah. And I know that if you have any questions, you can reach out to her and she can help
For
you.
sure. Absolutely. Happy to help.
Right?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us and being part of this conversation. If you have any questions, please reach out to me or reach out to Leah, or if you want to reach out to Julie. So then I will have her information on there because you do coaching too, right?
I do. I do general life coaching,
Yes.
and I incorporate a lot of these tools in my general life coaching because that's what I've found people need so much of it.
Yeah. Well, and then like I would say like all three of us, because of what we've gone through, we've found what works for us and coming to realize that it's not just all mindset work, like there is body work
Right.
that needs to be needed.
Yeah.
So so I will also have Julie's information on there as well.
Wonderful.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. We will talk to you all later. Thank you so much. Bye.
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 How do I stop?